wonderful day. But I also hope that you've had a wonderful weekend. That's right. I hope you can. All right. We're going to get right into it. We're going to look at the top 10 reasons research shows that couples report they deal with. It was a national study done by Life Innovations. That's Dr. David Olson's group, a wonderful man, and his team is phenomenal. I've been a part of that organization as I have been an instructor for their flagship marriage and premarital assessment called Prepare Enrich. Well over 750,000 people have taken that test over the years, probably up in the millions at this point, come to think of it. But it's the most widely used and the most statistically sound premarital inventory. All right, it's called Prepare. Excellent. But with all this data, they're also able, in connections, they're also able to do research across the states, state by state, however they want to do it. And they released some data, Life Innovations did, looking at 21,501 married couples from every state. And what were they saying were the top 10 issues that the major issues that they actually struggle with? You know, you'd probably be surprised by some of these, as I was when I read the data. And so we're going to spend our time today talking about those. And as I do, I want you to think about your own relationship. Think about how things are in your relationship. You know, one of the things that we talk about here at Relate Well is that the most important part of a marriage is not the individuals, it's us. When us wins, you both win. When us loses, you both actually lose. And so we believe that that you live in your marriage for the sake of us. It's also, the most important part, because how do you know when you have us in your marriage? Simple. You feel it when you have it and you feel it when you don't. And every decision you make in your marriage gives to you or it gives to us. If the bulk of your decisions are based on what's best for you, that's okay. Just don't complain when us goes away. But how do you know if you have us in your marriage? It's actually simple. You feel it. You feel it. When us is in the house, you feel the love, you feel the warmth, you feel the tenderness, you feel the connection. You also know when us is not in the house, you will feel that too. You'll feel the tension, the angst, the resentment, the unforgiveness, the bitterness, the coldness, the silence. And even your children know, because they can feel its presence and they can feel its absence. Everybody knows when us is in the house or not. So let's do this. Let's jump right into the data and take a look at what the research shows by Life Innovations. National study, 21,501 couples across all 50 states. What do they report are the major issues that they have to deal with in marriage? Number one. Are you ready? Problems in sharing leadership. That's right. Problems in sharing leadership. You know, there's for the most part, two primary views of leadership in relationships. One is what's called the traditional roles of leadership, and then there's equalitarian roles. Traditional roles is the man is the head of the home, the wife submits. This is that Beaver Cleaver model from way back. You'll actually see this espoused in many Protestant churches. The guy is the head. Her job is to submit. She doesn't get to make decisions. He gets to make all the decisions. Her job is just to submit. She is the one that does all the cooking, cleaning, everything like that. You see, and he's the breadwinner of the home. His responsibility is making sure the yard is done. Her responsibility is taking care of the kids. Those are very, very traditional roles, and were traditional roles throughout American history. Yet, with the emergence of women's rights, which I believe was needed, women can vote just as much as men, and those kind of things, you have another version of leadership where actually men and women are equals in their marriage, and thus they both can push a vacuum cleaner. They both can wash dishes. They both can wash clothes. I'm not here to serve you, and you're not here to serve me, i.e., as a slave, right? We both will come up with decisions and agreements together. No one person makes unilateral decisions. In equalitarian relationships, in these relationships, you got to work together. You have to work together, make decisions together so that us wins, you see. And so you have these two views. And one of the things that that Life Innovations tests for in their premarital and marriage inventory is what is the role relationship. What do you look for in terms? Are you looking for traditional roles? Are you looking for equalitarian roles? And where conflict happens is where they're not able to work together because they want equal sharing, or when one person is expecting equal relationship roles and the other is expecting traditional. Give you an example, real case. Many years ago, I was on staff at a church and I did all the premarital there. All right. And we were running about 78 weddings average a year. So we did a lot of weddings, right? I did a lot of premarital. And in the Prepare Enrich test, there's a section that's measured on role relationship. And again, it measures traditional roles versus equalitarian roles. And this young couple had been dating. She was still living at home, by the way. And he had been on his own for about 6 years, had his own apartment. They got engaged and they decided to buy a house together before they got married. So they bought the house and he moved in prior to the marriage. All right. But they had not moved in to live with each other yet. And so we're doing the premarital, and she begins to tear up. And she says, my biggest fear is that he's not going to need me when we're married. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, well, we got the house, and I go over there to clean dishes and, vacuum and wash his clothes, but he always has those done. He's not going to need me. Of course, he said, well, honey, I've been on my own for 6 years. I had my own apartment. And I've been working on my own. I've been doing things for years. She says, I know, but we're going to be married and you're not going to need me. And you can feel the pain in her, but you can feel the tension. And I said, hang on a minute. This isn't good or bad. This has to do with expectations. They said, what do you mean? And I had them turn to that section of their profile. And I said, look here, this score here, I told her, I said, we'll call her Samantha. Samantha, you're looking and expecting traditional roles in marriage. That's what you're expecting. She says, that's what I was always taught. I grew up in the church. I was taught that was the way it's supposed to be. And he's looking for equal roles. In his mind, you're just as much an equal to him. He can do those things just as much as you can do those things. The conflict in the marriage wasn't about him or her. It was their expectations about where the roles were, who was the leader, who wasn't the leader, et cetera, et cetera. So what we were able to do is have a wonderful, great conversation around what is that leadership going to look like for them? What are the roles going to be in that, you see? And they negotiated something that would work for both of them. And it really helped them break free of expectations and create an understanding of what the leadership is going to look like for them as a couple. You see, sometimes in some circles, the idea that the man's in charge and the woman is to submit have actually been used to abuse women, to subvert women, to negate them, to discredit their thinking. I'm not saying I agree with it because not everybody who lives in traditional models does that, but it has been used that way, you see. And so you have to decide and work out in your marriage who's in charge, you see. In my marriage, I would say that we're kind of in the middle. We're not very traditional, but we're not very equal either, you see. Luella looks to me for leadership, but I look to her for input. I look to her sometimes to make a decision because she's better suited in certain areas to decide about certain things where I'm not. I use her giftings for our marriage. She uses mine for our marriage. So I'm kind of in that middle section where, I can step up and be the head of the home if I need to be, but I don't really need to be that way or live that way, you see, because what I believe is living for us. When us wins, you both win. So in our marriage, we think of it this way. whose decision is who among the two of us is better suited to make that decision on behalf of us. We come up with that decision and we go ahead and work it out that way. So the first the number one problem that folks report are problems in sharing leadership. I think those problems come from a lack of understanding of what that leadership looks like and the roles, and they need to negotiate that and come up with an agreement so that us wins. Number two, one partner is too stubborn. Did you get that? One partner is too stubborn. Stubbornness. You think about a donkey just sits down and it ain't moving, right? Stubborn. You can't move them. Stubbornness ultimately is about pride. Stubbornness ultimately is about one person being right and being unwilling to work with another. Stubbornness is basically saying, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to negotiate with you. I am unwilling to cooperate. Folks, relationships to be successful and healthy require maturity, emotional maturity on behalf of both parts. If you live your life as a stubborn individual, you understand, one, that shows immaturity on your part. But more importantly, what it really says is basically this: I'm not willing to cooperate, negotiate, or work out anything on behalf of us. I'm going to do it my way. You see, stubbornness is when you dig your heels in. When you dig your heels in, when you're immovable, when you're not willing to listen, when you're not willing to consider possibilities, whenever you dig your heels in and you live that way, that sense of stubbornness, what you're really saying to your partner is, I want to have my way and I'm not willing to work with you. Keep that up long, you will have a problem in the marriage, guaranteed. Where it really becomes a problem is when you're stubborn overall in many areas of your life. That's more of a character issue, you see, a character flaw, character defect, as we would say in the recovery world. It's a defect of character when one person is too stubborn. I've done marriage therapy for 30 years, and I work with all kinds of folks, people from the faith background, people outside of the faith background. I've worked with everything from addictions in marriages to abuse in marriages to people who grew up with trauma and they've never learned to bond, but they've bond through trauma. They've bond through fear. Families and marriages that have been harmed by unhealthy teaching in their faith group. You see, their faith system that teaches stuff that doesn't really work in healthy relationships or in life. Legalism, doctrinal legalism that poisons it poisons one's soul, but also will poison relationships around you. When you work with these families, these couples, one of the hardest things for people to do is to be teachable. One of the things I taught my kids many years ago is this: you always know mature people. Mature people are teachable. Immature people are not. Immature people act like they know everything. And because I'm right and you're wrong. Immovable, stubborn. I've come to realize something. Gottman's research shows that 68, listen to the number, 68%, folks, 68% of issues in a marriage have no solution. He calls them perpetual problems. But what he does know and indicate in the research is that what he calls masterful couples at the highest level of maturity who do well in our world, we say people who learn to maturely live for us, those couples don't let unsolvable problems destroy the relationship. They stay humble. They work together to find solutions. And if they can't, then with goodwill and respect, they agree to disagree and just come to a realization, I'd rather have the relationship than try and dig my heels in and win a fight. If you want to dig your heels in and win a fight, feel free. But I promise you, stubbornness doesn't build intimacy. It just builds resentment in your partner over time. Number three, stress created by child rearing differences. Number three problem, stress that has been created by your differences in perceptions, differences in beliefs about, differences in how you parent. You know, Lou and I have raised three children. They're adults now. Current ages are 33. Excuse me. Yes, 33, 31, and 29. They're all about 2 years apart. Boy, girl, boy. And we started having kids when we were in seminary, when I was in graduate school, working on my doctorate and 2 master's degrees. And so I worked at a psychiatric hospital. I worked with some leaders in the country around healthy relationships and family and parenting, and so I had a lot of great people to give input. You see, there's a lot of books out there on parenting. Many of them disagree with each other. Many will agree. And so you have all these different views. You got the views from no spanking and don't discipline to yes, you have corporal punishment. And all 50 states allow for corporal punishment, doesn't allow for abuse, you see. And so some people allow for spanking and punishment. One thing I've learned was this, and it was true in our home. No matter what happens in our home with our kids growing up, Luella and I were always going to be a unified front in front of them. If her and I had differences in parenting, we would discuss those differences behind closed doors away from the kids. They would not hear those differences. All right? But the rule was, and the kids knew this, if mom tells you, then it's as good as dad is telling you. If dad says this, it's as good as mom said that. Why do we do that? It's so that they wouldn't split us. We needed to stay cohesive. And because we need to stay cohesive, the kids knew if mom tells you something, it's as good as dad telling you. And if dad tells you something, it's as good as mom telling you. You can't go to dad to get something that you want that mom already told you no about. That's splitting us, and it's disrespectful, and it's manipulative. It's manipulative. And so they always knew that. Now, in our years of parenting, Luella and I were different. We were different. Luella, you see, I remember before our first son was born, she's like, they're not going to have candy. They're not going to eat junk food. I'm like, oh, yes, they are. You see, we had a lot of differences in those areas. Okay. I introduced them to great music, Christian rock, regular, secular, good, wholesome music. Everybody needs to hear the Eagles, folks. Everybody needs to know Journey. Everybody needs to know Bread and the Carpenters. Those are, country music. And so we were different in those areas, okay? And we had to respect those differences because we weren't there to harm our children. But when the child rearing differences creates conflict because you're not willing to work together, you're not willing to find a solution. All right? And we're not talking about issues of you can't beat the kids. Everybody knows you can't beat kids. We're not talking about those kind of things, but just in normal parenting. Some people have a view of parenting, and this is the way it's going to be. And this person wasn't parented that way. You see? Luella, example, she wanted to homeschool. I was not for it initially. All right. I had to work through some things. I'm a product of the public school. So was she. Hey, we did pretty good in our public schools, right? I grew up in a little country town, Powder Springs, Georgia. You see? And so we needed to come to some agreements of what that was going to look like if we did it. Eventually I came around and I basically made the decision, let's do this. I support it. She wanted to do it. Let's do it. And it became an us decision, you see. Now, we parented because you're parenting while they're at home. right? So she's a teacher, I'm the principal. That was the way it worked. And you don't want to go to the principal's office, I promise you. All right. We worked together. Did we have differences? Yes, we did. We respected those differences, and those differences that didn't do anything in one person's mind to damage the kids, we had to agree to disagree on. So when the kids were with me, they got to listen to country music. You see, Alan Jackson, George Strait. Of course, they don't really like country music to this day, probably because of me. But they're pretty well rounded. You got it. I taught them to think for themselves. I taught them to own their own mind. Luella was in a system that taught you not to think for yourself. Just do what you're told and believe what you're told. I grew up in that. My kids weren't going to live that way, you see. So number 3, the stress created by child rearing differences. Number 4, one partner is too critical and too negative. One partner is too critical and too negative. Gottman's research, John Gottman, University of Washington, who's really one of the most prolific researchers to date on marriage and what makes marriages successful, et cetera, et cetera. And his work was brilliant, longitudinal studies, those kind of things. He came up, based on his research, what he called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, referring to a Bible passage of the 4 horsemen. These 4 traits, when these 4 things are in your marriage, he can predict within 15 minutes of sitting with you, 93% accuracy, whether you divorce or not. What are they? Number 1, stonewalling, which just means I'm not talking to you, I go silent. Number 2, showing contempt for your partner. Having contempt for them, like rolling your eyes, pursing your lip, calling them names. You see, the reason contempt is so insidious is because contempt basically suggests you are lower than me. Contempt makes you morally superior to your spouse. Another one is defensiveness. Defensiveness. And guess what number 4 is? When you're critical and negative. That's right. It's one of the 4 horsemen. When you're critical and you're negative. You see, when we're critical and negative constantly, what you're really saying is your partner's inferior, that nothing they do has value or merit, that they can't do anything right. You're right, they're wrong. Why can't you do it my way? Because my way is better than your way. Criticism basically minimizes other people, minimizes who they are, what they believe, what they do, because you're always finding fault. Research shows that people who are critical can destroy the emotional soul of others long term. You don't have a lot of friends when you live a life of criticism, and your marriages most likely won't make it either. But you think about it. If you're constantly critical about your partner, it does beg the question, what'd you marry them for? If they're that bad of a person and they walk out of your life, you should be rejoicing about that because you find nothing positive about them. The remedy to criticism, is gratitude, appreciations. Every day we need to share things we appreciate. To live a life of gratitude is like an inoculation against a spirit of negativity and criticism. To live a life of gratitude is a very powerful way to live life. Don't have a spirit of criticism be negative. Look for things to be positive. Be aware. Your partner does things around you all the time that you don't even notice, that if you took the time to notice, you could be grateful for. All right. Number 5 top issue that couples report in this national study. When one person feels that they're responsible for the problems in a marriage. That may be because they have a low self-esteem, That may be because they don't have to really think for themselves, and their partner is able to manipulate them to believe that they are constantly the problem. The problem is if I believe that I am responsible for the issues, or you guilt me into doing that, and so I believe it anyways because you guilt me and manipulated into it, over time, that builds a sense of your self-esteem whittles away for sure. Your self-confidence whittles away. You start to question your own thinking. You start to question the things you actually see. You're not sure you're seeing what you see anymore. You see, when you feel responsible for issues for long term, you're going to feel resentful towards your partner. You see, what's wonderful in a healthy marriage is that people take responsibility for their choices, but the goal in the marriage is not to blame. It's to own your choices and work together as an us to find a solution. It's always about the relationship. But when you're pointing out that it's one person's problem always, and they start to feel responsible for it, that'll rip an us apart rather quickly. In healthy marriages, both parties of the us, both partners, own their own stuff. They own their choices. They're self-aware. Because they're self-aware, they have self-control. They regulate themselves. They're aware if they're about to say something, and they stop themselves from doing it. They don't blame people for the things that happen. Number 5 was feeling responsible for issues. Number 6, and this is an interesting one. Couples report across all 50 states in this national study that one partner wishes the other person had more time with them. Now, that is something that goes on in my marriage. I will be open and honest with you. I travel a lot. Before pre-COVID, I was gone about 42 weeks out of the year, traveling, speaking, doing intensives. When I was home, working every weekend, doing intensives. So I was gone a lot. And one of the things that Luella really wanted was more time with me. And I had to become strategic in that. It's like she said to me a long time ago, when you come home from work, I need you to be present. I don't need you on your phone. I need you to be present emotionally. Be here for me. That's one of the things I never saw growing up. When my dad was home, he was in his bedroom watching TV, not interacting with any of us, and he was on his phone, usually talking business till 8 or 9, 10 o'clock at night. And one of the things that I really have to watch in my own journey is making sure that I give us adequate time. You see, when a partner doesn't feel that they have enough time together with you, they feel disconnected. They feel isolated. They may feel that you don't care because you're not making time for them. We always say, well, it's about quality, not quantity. Wrong. My kids, listen, my kids don't want 3 minutes of quality time. They want a lot of time that's quality every week on a regular basis. So does your marriage. It needs it as well. You build into your marriage schedule a date night, schedule time to talk, schedule time to deal with conflict, schedule sex as you have to. You see, do all those things. Do all of those things. Number seven. One partner wishes the other was more willing to share their feelings. The seventh leading issue that couples report as a major issue in this life innovation study was that one partner was wishing, hoping, expecting, needing, longing for their partner to share their feelings with them. Folks, true intimacy is built through confiding. Confiding is the key to bonding. It's hard to confide. It's hard to bond to someone who won't confide in you, who won't share their thoughts, their feelings, their dreams, their hurts, their thoughts about something. their feelings about something. See, bonding and attachment takes place through what's called the limbic brain, the emotional part of the brain, on the right side. This is where pain and pleasure comes from. You see, we're created for attachment. We're created for connection. We're created for intimacy. We're created for healthy connection. But that can only happen when both partners are willing to attach and bond by sharing their feelings, emotions with each other. I'm working with a couple currently, and he's said the last 2 days, I don't have feelings. I just think. I don't have feelings. I just think. And yet, he can get excited about a football team. He can get excited about this. He gets excited about that. He feels. What he doesn't do is he doesn't share his feelings emotionally, vulnerably, and particular, he doesn't share his painful ones. Well, what was rather interesting was today we did a skill we call it healing the heart, which allows you to go into that right side of your brain and you just get out. What are you angry about? What are you afraid of? What are you sad about? What do you regret? What are you grateful for? Interesting. He just broke down and sobbed over and over. He shared his fears. He felt his anger. He shared his pain and his hurt and his losses, his regrets. He feels. He was able to get in part of that. And when that sharing time was over, and it was about an hour and 10 minutes using the scale with him, I asked her what was it like to be able to hear all that. And she said, I haven't felt disconnected to him in a long time. Get that? I haven't felt disconnected to him in a long time. Why? Because intimacy comes through the sharing of feelings, emotion. The emotional part of the brain is the heart. It's your heart. And we need to be able to have the ability to share our feelings with each other. And by the way, when you share your feelings with someone, you don't want them criticized. You don't want them judged. You don't want them analyzed. You don't want them criticized. We need to be able to share our thoughts and feelings with our partner, knowing that whatever we think or feel doesn't have to be agreed with. It needs to be understood and respected. Number 7, with one partner wishes the other is more willing to share their feelings. Number 8, you ready? Number 8, one partner is avoiding conflict with the other partner. Avoidance of conflict. This is a huge one because people who avoid conflict think that they're doing a good thing. If I don't talk, if I don't share, if I stay passive, if I don't get involved, I avoid the conflict, what you're actually doing is you're prolonging conflict. Conflict is not solved through avoidance, being passive. All you're doing is keeping the conflict going. And long term, the person who tends to be the avoider becomes angrier over time. And here's the other thing research shows. When you tend to avoid conflict, your tendency is to see your partner as dominating, controlling. Why? Because they're speaking up, they're sharing. Not because they're aggressive, maybe they're just assertive. Being assertive is healthy. But if you're an avoider, you're going to see that as threatening. You're going to see that as threatening to you. Why? Because you avoid conflict. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to deal with it. So you rather live in denial and not deal with those things. Avoidance of conflict doesn't solve problems. It just prolongs them. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Speak up. Say what you think and feel. Don't avoid conflict. Just know how to deal with conflict in healthy, mature ways. That's what we do in Relate Well. We teach people how to speak up, how to get your voice. You need your voice, but just share your voice with goodwill and respect, in a caring way, which requires humility. You see, you need to speak up. Just do it respectfully. But avoidance doesn't build a relationship. It actually harms them long term. Number nine problem. There's difficulty completing tasks. Have you ever noticed that that thing you wanted that your partner to do, they said they do, they haven't done it yet? You wanted that thing over there fixed and they haven't fixed it yet, or you asked them to do this and they haven't done that yet. Difficulty completing tasks. They could be as little as fixing something, changing something, stop doing this and start doing that. And for whatever reason, it doesn't get done. It doesn't get done. You know, I had a couple here not too long ago where one of the things she's been upset about for 5 years, they built a new house. He built it all himself. Phenomenal carpenter. Built it. He did everything except the foundation on his own. Everything. Built it for his wife. It's about, he told me it's about a 5,800 square foot home. So it's a big house. I've not seen it. The bathroom's not finished. It has the bathroom, the master bath doesn't even have a door on it yet. The closets aren't done. Her clothes are still on boxes for 2 years, folks. 2 years. He's building everybody else's house, and he'll drop what he's doing with his family to go do something for somebody else, but he won't fix it at their house. Difficulty completing tasks. The message he's been sending by not finishing those things over the years is you're not important. You don't have value. You see, he would finish tasks for other people, but he wouldn't do it at home. And don't be that way. Don't be that guy, right? Don't be that lady. And number 10, major issue based on the Life Innovation Study of 21,501 couples across all 50 states. Here it is. Ready? Differences never get resolved. Differences never get resolved. One thing I've learned about life is not everything is right and wrong. Some things are just different. And sometimes our differences create problems, but we never resolve those differences. Now, let's be honest, 68% of problems don't need a solution. There's a difference, but you do solve it when you agree to disagree, or you do solve it and say, listen, it's okay for you to go do that because I don't agree with it, but I understand I can't control it. You're free thinking. Right? At least there's a resolution to it that you both understand and agree to. Us wins, you see. But when differences never get resolved, then those, and because they're not resolved, even in terms of just agreeing to disagree, then there's ongoing tension. And that ongoing tension around those differences over time just grow deeper, more resentment, more ill will, more disrespect around those issues, because differences never get resolved. So those are the top 10. So let's wrap up with some positive things based on the research as well. Ready? In strong marriages, this is what both partners say. Number one, in strong marriages, this is what both partners reveal. Number one, they both feel the freedom to share their feelings and ideas. There's a security that I can say what I think and what I feel. I have an idea, and they know that they know what they think and feel is going to be honored and respected, but not necessarily agreed to. Number two, the partners understand each other's positions. They understand each other's positions on whatever the topic is. Number three, strong marriages report that when there are disagreements, they both take the disagreements seriously. They don't invalidate them. They don't minimize it. They take it seriously. Why? I love you. You love me. We are important. You are important. The things that bother you bother me. Why? Because you're important to me. We are an us. So they take those things seriously and they work actively and they cooperate, which is number four. They work cooperatively to find solutions and resolve those conflicts. So let me go over those again. Ready? Strong marriages. This is what both partners say. They feel the freedom to share their thoughts and feelings and ideas. And they understand, number two, that their partner understands and cares about those ideas, though they may not necessarily agree, which means they take their disagreements seriously. They don't minimize those things. They value that we have a disagreement and they work on those disagreements. And lastly, they're working cooperatively. Number four, they work cooperatively to resolve those problems. So there you go. There you go. Research shows from the Life Innovations National Study, top 10 things that couples report are the big issues in a relationship. And then 4 things these couples report from strong marriages. This is what they see. I hope in some way this has been insightful. And here's my real hope. If, for whatever reason, any of those 10 things are in your marriage, learn our Relate Well program. Go to relatewell.us and get the core program, because the Relate Well curriculum actually is designed to make sure those 10 things don't ever show up. Relate Well is many years of my work, the influences in my life, the mentors that I've had, and it's research-based, so it's based on research, and it actually teaches you how to bond, how to emotionally connect, how to emotionally regulate yourself, so you can speak the truth in a loving way and be slow to anger and quick to hear. You can listen well, and you can love, because love has a tone to it, you see. So those are some things I want to think about. Go to relatewell.us. You can get the Relate Well program there and learn it in your own home. If you're single, it's good prevention work. If you're dating, very good prevention work. And if you are married, it's great prevention work. But if you're struggling in your marriage, it's a really good therapeutic tool to help you get unstuck and moving. Because why is it different? We teach you the skills of what to do different. We teach you what to do different to create a difference. Dr. Rick, thanks for hanging in there with me. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.